Yep. Okay, let's make a start then. So good afternoon and welcome to our mini conference on doughnut economics. And we've called it Tasters from the Doughnut, a recipe for thriving, because we want to find out how other places are applying this vision of what it means for humanity to thrive in the 21st century. And we'll be getting some of those tasters today from Cornwall, from Amsterdam and from Cambridge. I'm very much looking forward to hearing from our speakers. So my name is Kate Locke, and I'm a member of York Green Party. I also work in climate change, communications and policy for my day job, which is at the University of Leeds. And I'll be chairing this event along with my Green Party colleague, Tom Franklin, who is also busy behind the scenes here on Zoom. Hi from Tom. So this event is part of York Environment Week, and it will be recorded, and we have started recording now so that it can be viewed afterwards, and it'll be put on the York Green Party YouTube channel. And I'm sure Tom, if he hasn't already, will post the link to that at some point in the chat. So this is a webinar format, so please post any questions in the Q&A. There will be an opportunity for a few follow-up questions after each presentation, but we do need to keep to time. So apologies if we don't get to all of your questions, but there will be a panel session for 30 or 40 minutes or so, if we're keeping to time, at the end. So hopefully we can cover most of your questions then. So to the format, let's see, that's up. First of all, we're going to find out more about what doughnut economics is. And then we're going to have a short film from Kate Raworth, whose 2017 book of the same title, here it is, was an international bestseller and is sparking conversations all over the world about reimagining and remaking our future. And after that, we'll hear from two of our speakers before taking a short comfort break, and then we'll return for our third speaker and then go into the Q&A with our speakers and some other panelists as well. You might see that Mark Duris's name is on for the panelists. Mark's not very well, so he may be listening in, and if you are, hi Mark, but he won't be joining us as a panelist, but Molly Scott Cato will be joining us later on for the panel. So just a word to our lovely speakers, please keep to time. I'll try and give you a 5-minute warning and then a 1-minute warning. So apologies for butting in, but it just means that we can keep things flowing. So I think without more ado, we'll go on to introduce the first speaker. And this is Lukas Hardt. And Lukas has just completed his PhD at the University of Leeds on, correct me if I'm wrong, the macroeconomics of energy use and structural change for a post-growth economy. Is that right, Lukas?
Yes.
Yeah, great. And he's also a part-time research fellow, and he did a master's degree in ecological economics, also at Leeds, and incidentally at the same time as me when I was doing my MSc in sustainability. So good to see you again, Lukas. Lukas currently volunteers with the Wellbeing Economy Alliance, which is the leading global collaboration of organizations, alliances, movements and individuals working together to transform the economic system into one that delivers human and ecological well-being. And I've asked Lukas to introduce the concept of doughnut economics to us in a simple and speedy summary before we hear from Kate Raworth herself on film about how it can be downscaled to the city level. So over to you then, Lukas.
Okay, yeah, hello to everyone from me. I'm really happy to be here and give you that introduction that Kate has asked me to do. I've been given 13 minutes, so I will try and stick to that, but it will be a bit of a whistle tour of doughnut economics. So I'm gonna start sharing my screen. And if that works, right, I think that should be the point. And basically, in the next 10 minutes, I'm gonna talk a little bit about why we need doughnut economics to have a little refresher, and then fundamentally, doughnut economics is about basically thinking differently about the economy and how we could go about organizing it. And I will touch on kind of 3 slightly different aspects. One is thinking differently about the goal of the economy. One is thinking differently about what the economy actually is, and one is thinking how we can change it. So I'd start with just a brief reminder of why we need donut economics, although most of you here are probably aware of it, and that is really that our current economic system is not delivering on what we need. So on the one hand, we have the environmental impacts from years and years of growth and more pollution and resource use, which means we're now facing quite a few important environmental emergencies. And one way how that has been captured is the idea of planetary boundaries, which you can see in the picture here. And that is basically a concept some scientists have come up with, where they looked at different processes in the Earth system, which we are interfering with as people, and kind of identified some thresholds, saying if we get above these thresholds, then we're into serious trouble. Or as they say in the paper, transgressing one or more of the planetary boundaries could lead to catastrophic change at the continental to global scale. And at the moment, we are transgressing about 5 of them. So that's the environmental side, but on the social side, our economy is also not delivering what we need. So basically, both in the globally and in the UK, there are lots of people in poverty who don't have enough to eat. And there's a massive social inequality as well. So fundamentally, the idea behind donut economics is that our economy is not delivering at the moment, and that the way we think about the economy at the moment is not helping us to address these problems, and that we need a kind of new way of doing economics. And I will delve into that in a minute. I would just wanted to mention beforehand that donut economics is kind of part of a wider movement that's getting more and more traction throughout society, which is about looking differently at the economy and thinking beyond economic growth, which is stuff like the post-growth economics or degrowth or well-being economics, where I'm quite involved in the group in Scotland. And all of these kind of, they have some differences, obviously, but there's also a lot of consensus on different ways of doing things. So right, so donut economics, the first bit where donut economics comes in is really thinking differently about the goal of the economy. Where do we actually want to get to? And this is where the donut comes in. And I'm sure we're going to see this picture a lot more today on quite a few slides, so I'm going to try and keep it brief. And basically, the idea is that this donut represents where we want to go, and you have these 2 circles. And the outside circle is the planetary boundaries, which I've already mentioned. So where we have to stay in, or in those cases where we are already transgressing the boundary, we need to get our impact back within these boundaries globally. And then the inner circle is basically the social foundation. So this is the stuff that our economy needs to deliver for everyone in order to have a good life, such as water and food, but also political voice and education and these kind of things. And then the space between the 2 circles is really where we want to be. And Kate Raworth calls that a safe and just space for humanity. And in some ways, this then provides us with a quite powerful picture of where we want to get to. But then in terms of practical things, we're not actually doing very well of getting there. So some colleagues of mine at Leeds University looked at lots of countries to find whether any of them currently are in the donut, and they didn't find any. And the picture is basically not that surprising. So basically you have the rich countries, which are pretty much on the top right of the graph, which is, so they're doing quite well in terms of social thresholds, but they transgress quite a few planetary boundaries. And then you have the poorer countries in the bottom left of the graph, which are much better environmentally, but they're doing much worse in terms of achieving social thresholds. And where we want to be is really in the top left corner of the graph, where the little donut is. But we're quite far away from that, and there's quite a long way to get there. But then really, donut economics is much more than just thinking about a different goal of the economy. It's really starting from a different vision of what actually is the economy. So in current economic thinking, somewhat simplified, the main thing that makes up the economy is individuals who are rational, self-interested, and they they buy and sell stuff in markets, which essentially work their magic to optimize our consumption and produce as much as possible. And if we leave them alone, more or less. So that's kind of all there is, but it's a very incomplete picture of what the economy is actually made up of. And donut economics has very different vision from which it starts. So first of all, you have a very different picture of what humans actually are like. So it's much more recognized that we are social creatures. We influence each other, we are adaptable, and we are very much wired to collaborate and not only look after our own self-interest. And that's a much richer picture of what we're like. And if you want to design an economy that allows people to flourish, it's quite important that you start from a picture that realistically depicts how people work. And then in addition to that, basically donut economics also recognizes that the economy is much more than just markets and the state, which is the two domains that you normally find in economics textbooks. And Kate Raworth explicitly proposes these 4 domains, where she also includes the household and the commons. And commons are basically resources and places and things that are managed by the community as a whole and are neither owned by the state or by individual private actors. And basically having these parts in there is really important because it recognizes that there's a lot of really important care work, for example, going on in households, which is generally unpaid and generally done by women, and that's completely invisible in our current economic thinking. And it also recognizes a lot of the kind of communal volunteering and community groups and the stuff they do and the important things they deliver, which are also not generally recognized as part of the economy when you talk about it in conventional terms. And then finally, the last aspect is that for donut economics, it's very clear that the economy is a subsystem of the environment. So everything we do needs energy and materials, and we emit wastes and pollution into the environment. And really, our economy is absolutely dependent on it, and it couldn't function without a healthy planet. So that's kind of a very different kind of vision where you start from in terms of what the economy is.
You've got 5 minutes.
Okay, good. I think I can do that. And having that different vision is really important because the vision really determines where you think you can make a difference and how you can change the economy. And when you have this picture of the economy as basically being made up of markets and self-interested individuals that work according to some mechanical principles, you automatically end up at this picture where you automatically end up at a kind of way of doing politics, which is very much top down, and it's all focused on fiddling around with prices and getting the prices right and these kind of things. Or more fundamentally, the way our current system is set up, that basically policymakers emphasize that we need to let the markets do its magic, we need to let it grow, we need to stay out of that, and then we kind of clean up the inequalities and the environmental pollution that we produce afterwards. But that's really not working anymore, as like the little cartoon shows. And donut economics has a different way of viewing the economy. So it's much more about a complex system that cannot be completely controlled from the top. And so it's just much more view of gardening rather than engineering, in the words of Kate Raworth. And then you end up at a different way of thinking about how we can change the economy. And it's much more about designing it in the first place so that it doesn't produce inequalities and environmental pollution. So it's supposed to be regenerative by design. That means the economy is set up in a way that it basically makes the environment better rather than worse, or at least where we need to use non-renewable resources, we try and reuse them as much as possible, and we build in circular economy principles, so we don't need to do all that cleaning up afterwards. And the same applies for the social aspect of inequality, that the idea behind a donut donut economics is that we design the economy so it doesn't produce all this inequality in the first place. So we need less of the redistribution that the government is doing at the moment. And one key thing there is to look at ownership, like who owns businesses, who has control and ownership of land and other assets, which allow them to make a lot of money with that, and to make sure that basically the value that is created in the economy is shared with all of the ones who are interested. So that's me on basically in a very brief overview. I hope it was useful. But really the essence is that donut economics is about thinking differently. And when you start from these different ideas, you can come up with very different solutions and very different questions from lots of conventional economic thinking. And I'm looking forward to hearing how that works in practice from some of the speakers who are coming after me. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lukas, and well done, 2 minutes under time. Great, that means we've got time for a question. So just looking at the questions, we'll just start with the first one. I don't know whether you can see it, Lukas. It's from Mike Chitty, and he says, is donut economics possible without an accompanying donut ethics, different economic practices, or a different ethical basis for action?
I assume different from what the ethical basis is at the moment. I would say that's basically right. Yeah, we need a different ethics, definitely different ethics for businesses and the way they, the goals that they have, rather than just serving distant shareholders. They need to be open. Yeah, and then you can also talk about different ethics of consumption and how we make meaning in our lives, whether that is material consumption or whether we can find other outlets for that. But generally, yeah, I would agree with that.
That's great, thank you. We'll just squeeze in one more quick one from Pete Watkins, who asks, where would charities fit into that embedded economy? Not really from the market, but not really part of the commons either. So I don't know whether you've got a view on that, Lukas.
That's a very interesting question. I haven't thought about that. I would probably put them a bit more in the commons aspect, but yeah, no, it's an interesting question. Probably a good discussion to be had.
That's a very diplomatic answer. Thank you very much. Great. Well, we have to stop this session now with Lukas, but Lukas will be around for the Q&A later on, so you'll be able to